What is going on, everybody? You got Matty Brollic here, and I am back for a video that's honestly pretty important to me because it is my NPL Season 8 draft analysis, and I've been in the NPL for 5 seasons now, so you've seen a handful of these draft analyses, but this is going to be my final season in the National Pokeball League. That's right, my final season. Whether I'd come back, way later down the road in the future, I don't know for sure, but I've had a lot of time in this league. I want to step away, and I just want to make sure I give it a full, all-out go before I do leave, because I know last season I ended up drafting kind of like a meme team, and I was trying to just kind of have fun with it and see how far I could go with a team that was, I guess significantly less or just well under par compared to the rest of the league. And unfortunately, it did not end up going too well. So now I just want to give it one more shot where I'm really giving it my all, because I feel as though I've really improved over, I guess, the past year or so. And I haven't really been able to show that in the NPL. I really want to give it one more go and see, what happens. So this, like I said, will be my last NPL draft analyses possibly ever. So it's kind of an important video to me. So anyway, here's how I will structure this video. Hopefully I don't ramble on for too long. What I want to just talk about first is how we decided to go about the draft, what was the structure. Then afterwards I will go into my draft, and then finally, if I have time, I will go through the doc and show you guys other people's drafts. I don't mean to spoil them or anything. If you don't want to see that, then don't watch it. But I just want to go through the doc and give my thoughts on the draft in its entirety and just kind of go over what I think about some of the other teams. So without further ado, the Los Angeles Reshirams, National Pokeball League Season 8. Let's get into it. All right. So first, the draft structure. We decided to go with a points draft, and we had the ability to draft between 9 and 11 Pokemon. 9 and 12 Pokemon, which is something that I had a lot of influence on. Okay, so basically what happened this season was we had a lot of new coaches either get moved up from the minors or also have to fill in for people that left last season. So what we did was we decided that we were going to keep the same way we picked draft order last season, where people that didn't make the playoffs get randomized to choose their draft order. Then the people that did make playoffs get randomized to choose their draft order. The new coaches get randomized to choose their draft order. So it kind of helps out the people that didn't make the playoffs. Now, what almost happened before the season, which was like kind of irritating me, was we were considering just completely randomizing the draft order, or like where we would get to choose our draft order, which would suck because every season I've been in the NPL, or almost every season I've been in the NPL, I've done very well and have always been one of the last people to be able to choose my draft order, so I end up getting low picks. And I think that when you're towards the top of the draft order, there's kind of an upper echelon of Pokemon that you can choose from that are better than if you get a first round pick towards, the back half. Maybe let's say from 10 on, there really aren't as many. I'm just picking a random number, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a certain amount of first round picks that I think are really, really particularly good and more valuable than other first round picks. The other first round picks could kind of be more blended into either second round or just depending on when people want to draft this certain Pokemon. So because of that, I really wanted to get an early pick because, I didn't make the playoffs last season. So I figured it would be only fair, because I've gone so many seasons where I had to have a really late draft pick. It would only be fair if now I had an earlier one. So this time around, we got randomized, and I was actually randomized to be the third choice. And Gypsy was number 1 because we have a new rule where the champion will be able to choose their draft order first before anyone else, which I think is a great rule because even though normally you want to help out the teams that didn't do too well, at the same time, if someone keeps winning over and over again, it's going to get tiresome. You're not going to really want to do it. You're not going to have much motivation to just keep winning. But to be able to get a first pick, or at least be able to pick wherever you want to draft, it really helps you design the team the way you want to design it. So it's like, okay, I really want to draft Tapu Lele, which is something that we allowed this season. then if you win the league, you get number 1 pick if you'd like, and you could pick that Tapu Lele number 1, and go from there. You could have the team that you want, and I think that's a really nice thing that we've added. But then the other coaches that didn't make the playoffs all got randomized, and one of them was Aster, who actually got put before me. So I got the 3rd choice, but Aster chose to have pick number 3, so he gave me pick number 2, which was great. So that's how we decided to go about the draft order. We could have between 9 and 12 mons, and like I said, I was a big influence in that as well, because a lot of people like to go with 11 Pokemon for the cap as the amount that you could draft. And I really don't like that number. I don't like odd numbers in general for drafts, because if you have an odd number of Pokemon that you could draft, then the people who draft earlier will be able to draft earlier for more rounds than the people towards the back. So if there's an even number of rounds like 12, then the people earlier in the draft will be able to pick earlier for the odd numbered rounds, and then the people towards the back will be able to draft earlier for the even numbered rounds. So if they draft 12 Pokemon, then they get to draft 6 rounds earlier, where the people towards the front get to draft 6 rounds earlier than the people towards the back as well. So it kind of balances it out a little bit. It only doesn't balance it if some of the people towards the back don't pick the full 12 Pokemon, but it gives you the option to, which I think is a little more fair. So I'm glad that we allowed that. I know it's one more Pokemon to prepare for, but it kind of balances out, because last season we had the same cap amount of points as we did for this season. So the fact that we went from 11 Pokemon total to 12 means that it kind of balances out in the sense where you can't, on average, draft as many or as expensive Pokemon if you want to draft a team of 12 as you could if you drafted for a team of 11. So that's why I really like the way we did it this season. And yeah, so we went with a points draft. Some of the things that we allowed this season that we haven't in the past. We did allow Tapu Lele 2 seasons ago, but then we ended up banning it, and most leagues do have it banned. But I've been seeing it used in some leagues here and there, and we did some suspect tests before the season, and Tapu Lele really didn't seem like it was overpowered. And I'm a firm believer of the fact that I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's a very, very good Pokemon that should definitely be picked round 1, but I don't think it is broken. So Tapu Lele is one that we decided to allow. We decided to allow Aegislash. Now that one is something that you rarely ever see. I can't tell you the last time I've seen Aegislash allowed in a league. I know some people do these little Uber leagues on the side, but other than that, I have never really seen Aegislash allowed, other than when draft format first started. I think the GBA allowed it for 1 or 2 seasons when they first started, but now you hardly ever see Aegislash in the format. So that was kind of exciting that we allowed Aegislash, because I think it's a cool Pokemon. When I was thinking about it, it did seem like it would be a little broken, but I wasn't able to do the suspect test at the time because I was busy studying for something. So I watched some of them. It didn't look to be overpowered in the matches, and even Gypsy King used Aegislash, and he was one to totally advocate for it and say, like, listen guys, if you believe this thing is broken, then use it yourself, and you'll realize that it really isn't as broken as it seems. And I trust his judgment, because he's obviously unbelievable at draft format, and he's also really good with those types of bulky Pokemon like Aegislash. So the fact that he thinks that it really isn't over the top, and he actually was pretty adamant about the fact that it's not even close to being broken. So I'll trust his judgment there, and we allowed Aegislash. So we have Aegislash, Tapu Lele. We allowed Landorus Incarnate, which I am a firm believer is not broken. So I'm glad we allowed that. We allowed Mega Kangaskhan again as well, without Seismic Toss, which is not even close to being broken. And then Mega Mawile also, which I haven't seen it used enough, but I really don't think it's broken yet. Because what I've seen, it really hasn't performed particularly well. And I'm curious to see how it goes this season, because it definitely seems like a solid Pokemon, but I just don't think it's busted. So I think those are the only 5 that are normally banned in leagues. Like, of course, we allowed things like Kyurem Black, Hoopa Unbound, because those things are sometimes randomly banned. We didn't allow Mega Latios, but Mega Latios is allowed. So with that being said, I'll get into my actual draft, and I'll try to go through it somewhat briefly. And if, like I said, if we have time and I'm not going over like 35, 40 minutes, then maybe I'll go over some of the other teams on the dock. You kind of just saw my dog in the back. So anyway, Los Angeles Reshirams, NPL Season 8 draft, number 2 overall pick, and we go with Bring Selly Up, Celesteela. That's right, we went with Celesteela, and I just want to put this out there, okay? So during the suspect testing and everything, I decided to bring up the idea of suspecting Celesteela because I firmly believe that it is a Pokemon that isn't busted or anything. It's not just so broken, but it's just so low risk and so high reward that I don't know if it is healthy for the format. So like I said, not busted, not broken or anything, but just kind of unhealthy. And I thought it was something that maybe would be worth suspecting because it is such an excellent defensive Pokemon that has so few, I don't want to say so few checks, but it's just, I'll go back to saying so low risk, whereas it's got arguably the best defensive typing in the game, Steel Flying. It's up there for one of the best ones. And it's only got 2 weaknesses in Electric and Fire, and its defenses are pretty high, so it's hard to really break through it if you're not using super effective coverage. Now, it also has access to Leech Seed, which for a Pokemon that's so bulky and has such amazing offensive presence as well, with I think 101 base attack, 107 base special attack, and really solid coverage all around. It's not easy to switch into because either something comes in and it gets off a Leech Seed and it just heals itself back up. It could be really annoying with the Leech Seed either pivoting into something else that could handle the Pokemon in front of it, or just clicking Protect and healing up even more. And then it's also able to beat things that would absorb more Leech Seed, not necessarily Magikarp Pokemon, but Grass types. Grass types aren't affected by Leech Seed, but the thing is Celesteela is part Flying type and can really kind of punish these Grass types that would want to switch into it. So because of that, Celesteela is just really, really low risk defensively. Like I said, one of the best defensive typings in the game. Fantastic bulk, good offensive presence, amazing utility with Leech Seed, and only 2 weaknesses. So the weaknesses aren't that hard to cover, and if you can cover them well, then Celesteela just becomes obnoxious to almost every team defensively. And that's just defensively. Its offensive sets are terrifying because although they take more creativity, team support, things like that, it can be really hard to stop once the ball is rolling because it has that excellent snowballing effect coupled with Beast Boost, because with a certain amount of investment in special attack or attack, getting KOs with Celesteela will boost that stat and make it a lot harder to stop. And with Autotomize doubling its speed, then you basically need Scarfers to outspeed it. So you're kind of forcing Scarfers in prep, which number 1 is a little bit centralizing, and number 2, if you could remove a person's Scarfer, or if you can potentially set up another Autotomize, or if you have a Resist Berry for what that Scarfer might want to do to you, then you can kind of handle it and get past that. Now, it also has access to Z moves because we had a certain amount of Z points that we could have. So a Pokemon, for example, Celesteela was worth 18 points, which is the highest category of Pokemon. And we had 24 Z points in total. So if I give Celesteela the Z eligibility, then I only have 6 points left to use for Z eligibility on the rest of my team. So I gave it to Celesteela because with Z moves, it is so much harder to stop because its special attack and attack aren't amazing. They're very solid for a Pokemon that's so bulky and has such good coverage. But with Z moves and such good coverage, like I said, it becomes a massive threat because it gets that 1 KO with a Z move, and then all of a sudden that stat raises and it's a lot harder to check defensively. So Celesteela is terrifying on the offensive side, and you guys know how offensive I like to play. So that's something I'm definitely excited to see if it has potential this season, because I've seen people like Gypsy King sweep a lot of teams with Celesteela. As much as he uses defensive Celesteela, he also makes it work offensively too. And that's why I think it's so low risk and high reward, because either the defensive set will be low risk and high reward, or you could have, moderate risk with super high reward with the offensive sets. So it's really a threatening Pokemon. And if people start saying it's broken throughout the season, then, hey, I told you so. I was the one who wanted to suspect it, so you can't blame me for that one. So just wanted to get that one out there. And now we can move on to my next pick, which was Latios Heat. ode to the late great Eddie Guerrero. Now, Latios is a fantastic Pokemon all around, very solid. It's not quite as good as it was in Gen 6 because you have more Steel types, more Fairy types, just general better speed creep, better power creep. It's just not as dominant as it was in Gen 6, but it is still a very good Pokemon, and it just pairs quite nicely with Celesteela because Celesteela's weaknesses are electric and fire, and Latios resists both of those, and they make up 2/3 of the Dragon Fairy Steel core, so that is quite nice. Now, Latios does not have the access to Z moves, but it is very powerful on its own, has amazing coverage on its own, and even some good support options. It could be used offensively, it could be used defensively if you needed to. It could kind of do both at the same time because it has a really nice defensive typing. And yeah, Latios is a very good speed tier in base 110. Anything above 100 I would say is good, but that 110 echelon is very solid. You know, you don't want a team with a Pokemon that, or you don't want to have a team where you don't have anything at least at base 110, I would say, because then it's a lot harder to win speed control battles. That might be important. So I think 110 is at least where you should go. I think generally you want to go a little bit higher than 110, but 110 is quite solid. So it's a good speed tier, and with Latios' amazing power and solid bulk and good defensive typing, I think it pairs excellently with Celesteela, and it's just a really solid Pokemon all around. So next up, we completed the Dragon Fairy Steel core, and we went with Cyrene, the Azumarill, and I named it Cyrene. It's based off of an anime character. If you get the reference, I love you for that. And yeah, Azumarill is one of my favorite Pokemon to use in the format. I've been using it a lot more relatively recently. I started, I think, with the Draft Format Olympics, and I won that, and Azumarill was one of my MVPs, just a really solid Pokemon. Was able to bring it to almost every game, if not every game, and it is something that I think is kind of slept on because, for example, it was only 13 points in the NPL this season. I know guys like Jolt, who, you know, partially or have a lot of input on the dock, thinks that it's just not that good, and I totally beg to differ and disagree. I really think it's an amazing Pokemon because its bulk and defensive typing are some of the best in the game, and its typing is great offensively too. And its power plus its other abilities, which could be used, you know, really well defensively, just make it a versatile threat that is just, you know, very good for pretty much any team because it just forces a lot of prep both offensively and defensively. And, you know, I like that. And the fact that it could just be so solid at what it does in terms of, you know, taking certain hits and taking certain things on defensively while still keeping up so much offensive pressure because of the huge power ability and great stabs plus coverage. I really like Azumarill, and I think it's an amazing Pokemon and just the perfect way to round out this really solid Steel, Dragon, Fairy core. Now, I'm not one of those people who says it's mandatory to get, you know, Fairy, Dragon, Steel, and then Fire, Water, Grass, but I do think that Fairy, Dragon, Steel is a little more important because Steels are kind of mandatory. Fairies are kind of mandatory. I think Water and Grass are also kind of mandatory, but what's it called? I just think that if you're really trying to get a lot of synergy on your team, doing or getting Dragon Fairy Steel cores, Fire, Water, Grass cores are solid ways to do it just because they cover each other's weaknesses so well that you could do it in less Pokemon than if you're just drafting a bunch of different kind of random typings that happen to synergize well, but you need a lot of them to really cover each other's weaknesses. It's nice to just have, you know, a Fairy, Dragon, Steel core, and already right there, I know that I already have these three things cover each other's weaknesses almost perfectly, and I don't need to go out of my way to get so much synergy defensively with the rest of my draft. So that's kind of nice. And next up, for our fourth pick, we went with Meruem, the Nidoking. I love you for that reference. That one's kind of easier to get than the Cyrene one. But Nidoking, I also think, was a Pokemon that was slept on a little bit this draft, kind of, because it was only 12 points, whereas Nidoqueen was 13. Now, I'm someone who's used Nidoqueen a lot more than Nidoking. But the reason I've used Nidoqueen more than Nidoking is because it fit the teams I drafted it for more than Nidoking did, because a lot of those teams were really offensive. And with that being the case, Nidoqueen was kind of useful in being able to be a defensive pivot because most of the rest of my team just could not do that. So having a little bit of extra bulk there while the rest of my team could keep up the offensive pressure and not let it be too passive, I Nidoqueen was better for that role, in my opinion. But with a team that has a lot more natural bulk and solid defensive synergy, I think that Nidoking could be just as good, if not better, than Nidoqueen, because it's got a better speed tier, which is just nice, and I think it's very nice, and it's got a lot more power, which is just excellent because Nidoking, like the other Pokemon there, have the ability to really go offensive and defensive, because Nidoking has an amazing defensive typing. Like Poison Ground is a really good defensive typing, and it has the defensive stats to be able to be bulky enough to do or to fulfill certain roles, which is, you know, a nice thing. Whereas the rest of my team can support it if there are certain things that I can't take on. I have other solid, bulky, and synergetic Pokemon that could kind of handle Nidoking's weaknesses. So just having that extra power and having that extra offensive presence when I have a lot of things that can cover it defensively when I need to, really I think allows Nidoking to shine better than Nidoqueen. And it actually has, you know, like I said, the better speed tier, which makes it somewhat more of a viable Scarfer. You know, base 85 is pretty nice. Base 76 is like, and it'll outspeed most things that aren't Scarf. Like it could outspeed a lot of the unboosted metagame, but Nidoking has that edge over it because there's things like base 80s that can set up, you know, Mega Altaria, Mega Gyarados, is that whole kind of area over there. And it could also outspeed things like Mega Lopunny, Manectric, and Mega Sceptile and Beedrill as well when it's Scarfed, which those are things that Nidoqueen can't do. So it definitely has a nicer speed tier, and I think it kind of fits this team better than Nidoqueen would. And you guys basically know what Nidoking does. It can, you know, fire off really, really powerful attacks with excellent coverage, and has solid defensive typing like I mentioned, can set up hazards. Just a great Pokemon. As now we segue into the next Pokemon. I got sniped majorly right before Nidoking. I was about to get Mega Aerodactyl, but it got taken literally the pick before me because Aster was number 3 and I was number 2. And what was crazy was Aster got sniped a bunch of times right before he picked. So had he not gotten sniped that many times, he probably would have picked something else, and I would have been able to get Mega Aerodactyl, which I think would have fit really well on my team. I'm a huge fan of Mega Aerodactyl. I think it's like totally underrated. I think it's easily, I don't know if I want to say easily, but definitely in consideration for being a top 5 Mega in my opinion. But not a lot of people think that, and because of that, it's only 14 points, which is still kind of expensive, but not that expensive for how good Mega Aero really is in my opinion. So I was ready to pick that next, but I ended up getting Nidoking because it got sniped. So from there, I had to kind of change my draft plan, but I said, you know what? I want to make sure I get certain things that I know that I want. So next for my 5th pick, people laugh at me for this one, but I went with Dhelmise. Not that it's such a terrible pick, but people laugh because I like to reach for Dhelmise. I've been doing this in almost all the drafts I've been in ever since I started using it. It's just a Pokemon that I am so comfortable with. I have used it multiple times to very solid success. And this was before Ultra Sun and Moon, where it got both Knockoff and Synthesis, 2 very nice toys to add to its arsenal. So not that those improve it so much, but I think it definitely got considerably better, and I already use it in my opinion so well. So only 10 points was fantastic value for that. It's a ghost type, which also could rapid spin, so it's just so good with hazard control because, like I said, ghost type meaning it could spin block, and it could also rapid spin, meaning that it could allow you to keep your own hazards up, which I think is really useful, even though we've gotten so many new defoggers in Gen or an Ultra Sun and Moon. I think that overall it's just nice to have in your back pocket. And Dhelmise just has an amazing defensive and offensive typing with 3 stabs. You know, Steelworker, its ability gives it stab on steel type moves. So it has Grass Stab, Ghost Stab, and Steel Stab with other solid coverage moves. Like I said, Knockoff is one of them. It gets Earthquake as well. I'm just a very big fan of Dhelmise, and I really knew that I wanted it on my team. And because I was kind of rethinking the rest of my draft plan, I just went with Dhelmise at number 5. It's a little early for it, but I think I made the right call just because a lot of people went with grasses for the next 2 rounds after it went back, went away from me and started coming back to me. A lot of people started picking their grass types there. So if people had grasses in mind, then there's a decent chance that Dhelmise would have gotten sniped from me, which would have been upsetting. So I'm glad that I got it. And for my next pick, I was kind of teetering because the thing was I had in mind that I wanted Mega Aerodactyl, and that was going to be basically the rest of my speed. Having Latios at base 110 and Mega Aerodactyl at base 150, I figured that would be enough speed, because Mega Aerodactyl could outspeed a lot of Scarfers, but it outspeeds pretty much every unboosted Pokemon in the game. So that is a really, really nice thing to have, because you know that the only thing that really will be reliable to outspeed it are going to be Scarfers. So it just gives you, it makes it easier to pivot around these certain Scarfers that might be brought in to outspeed it. You will know which Scarfers can outspeed it, and you can kind of play around them defensively a lot more easily. So Mega Arrow, I think, would have been, like I said before, an excellent fit for my team. So I was really kind of deciding on what am I going to do to fill that speed void that Mega Arrow would leave. And I saw Raikou on the board. I've been meaning to try out Raikou. I think it's a pretty solid Pokemon. Just really good stats, and it has a nice speed tier in base 115. But then I also thought, you know what? Raikou really isn't a very good Scarfer, and the fact that I don't really like to, the fact that I was thinking that I'm not going to be too inclined to get this Pokemon as a Scarfer told me, okay, if I get this, I'm going to have to get one more really fast Pokemon that can potentially be a solid Scarf user, because Latios can be, but I do like to have solid options for speed control. So I decided to go with Raikou in this round, and like I said, no experience using Raikou, but I think that it is a pretty solid Pokemon, because it has it has a better than average move pool, very good stats, and overall has that nice speed. It's an electric type, only one weakness, so overall a pretty good pick. And then next on the wheel, I decided to go with Swellow. Now, Swellow is a Pokemon that I've really been meaning to try, because I've been helping people that have Swellow on their team build, and I've been like, wow, Swellow is good in almost all these matchups. And the fact that it can run both physical and special sets so effectively is awesome, because I love mixed attackers, and it's really gotten a buff since Gen 6, because even in Gen 6, it was pretty good with even in Gen 6, it could use the physical set pretty well, and the special set wasn't terrible, because it just had, Boom Burst and Scrappy, and it's just a strong move, so if you slap a Choice Specs on it, then it's actually decently strong. But the fact that it got a special attack buff in Gen 7, plus things like, it might have always had Heat Wave, I don't know, but it got things like Heat Wave, Hurricane, Boom Burst, whatever, so it got so much better in Gen 7, and I've been seeing how solid it really is, because that base 125 speed tier is excellent. That's a very, very good speed tier. The only notable Pokemon that really ties with it there is Weavile, and Weavile, I don't need to worry about outspeeding Weavile anyway, because it has things like Priority Ice Shard that would already knock out Swellow if I was speed tying him or faster anyway. So, yeah, it's a really solid speed tier on Swellow, and it also has access to U-turn. One thing that my team really doesn't have right now is solid momentum options. Like I said, Raikou, one of the main reasons I don't like it that much as a Scarfer is because its move pool is just kind of shallow, because it gets blocked by ground types fairly well. It can't just come in and Volt Switch on everything, because it doesn't have great coverage for ground types. Things like HP Ice they're only good against grounds that are 4 times weak to Ice. Same thing with HP Grass or whatever other hidden powers I want to run. It doesn't have something like Grass Knot, which is actually a strong grass move against most grounds, because a lot of them are heavy, so it doesn't have that ability, and it also doesn't have access to U-turn like things like Thundurus and Tapu Koko. So I like the ability to have U-turn on Swellow. It's a very solid pivot because of how threatening it is. It really, because it's so fast, and because it can be so powerful on both the physical and the special side, it does force a good amount of switch-ins, allowing it to pivot out and whatnot. So it is a good momentum-grabbing Pokemon. If you guys are wondering what I'm doing, I'm just petting my dog. It's a good momentum-grabbing Pokemon, and like I said, just really helps fill the void with the speed that Aerodactyl left. So that was our 6th pick. So we are halfway through the draft, because there was no way I was I'll spoil this now. There was no way I wasn't going to draft 12 Pokemon, because I like having more Pokemon than not, even if it's just going to be something that's 1 point. I think that, with my creativity, I can make it work, and even without it, it does kind of force my opponent to prep for 1 more Pokemon potentially, and if they don't, then I can punish them for it. That's just my opinion on it. I always like to go with more Pokemon if I can, if it's a scenario where there's just amazing things left on the board and I can keep, spending 15 points over and over again and I'm really kind of worn out, that's a little different. But for the most part, if I'm getting kind of a balanced draft, then I would like to get the full amount of Pokemon that I can. So next up, I went with Licky Licky for number 7, and I know that seems kind of early for number 7, but like I said, I was really trying to go with things that I knew that I wanted, and then I would kind of fill in the gaps at the end. I had an idea of what Mega I wanted, but most people had already drafted their Mega at this point, so I figured, let me just get things that I know that I want, and then I could kind of, worry about a couple other low-budget mons towards the end, and then go with my Mega. So I went with Licky Licky because I think it's one of the best normal types in the format. I have Swellow, but that's not it's not a normal type from a defensive standpoint. Normal types are pretty solid defensively because they often have fantastic move pools and solid bulk and only one weakness. So something like Licky Licky, for example, has Wish support, which is nice. I'm not usually someone who plays with Wish Pass very much. It's not a strategy that I enjoy using, but it's nice to have. And Licky Licky just has a fantastic move pool with solid abilities, just great stats all around. It's a very, very solid Pokemon, and even though it was only 7 points, I still decided to pick it at number 7 because it is something that if you've used it or if you know how to use it, you might want it a little earlier than people would expect. So that's why I was like, you know what, I want this Pokemon. I'm going to make sure that I get it. And yeah, so I went with Licky Licky. Then next up, for my 7th pick, I decided to go with, I believe it was Musharna. Now, I went with Musharna because I think that, actually, no. Licky Licky was my 8th pick because Swellow was 7th, not 6th. For my 9th pick, I went with Musharna because I think Musharna is a pretty solid Psychic type. It was only 6 points, and it's got a really solid move pool. And that move pool could actually really benefit from Z moves. So I was like, you know what? That's a pretty good fit because I think it's always kind of important to have a Psychic that's bulky enough to take on some powerful fighting types. I do have Delmise, which is immune to fighting, but overall, fighting types with good coverage and whatnot can be annoying for my team. So having Musharna could be kind of nice in that regard. It's just a fairly bulky Pokemon with a solid move pool. And it's just a Pokemon that I do think could be slept on a little bit, ironically enough, because it's a Pokemon that's always sleeping. But yeah, I just figured that Licky Licky would be a pretty good fit for the team. I forgot to mention the last few nicknames. Raikou, I stopped at Delmise. Delmise is James Dellsworth, a wrestling reference. Then, I love I'm going back to do this. Raikou, I was going to name Killua from Hunter x Hunter because Killua's ability is, lightning based, but I decided to go with Jesse Pinkman because Top Tier Boy loves Raikou and he wanted me to name it after him. So I went with Jesse Pinkman because that's my nickname for him. The guy from Breaking Bad, Jesse Pinkman, reminds me so much of Top Tier Boy, so I had to go with it. I had to do it to him. I went with Jesse Pinkman for Raikou. Swellow is Paul Heyman because it's, always screaming with Boom Burst. And Paul Heyman, if you guys watch wrestling, is a manager type of guy who's always coming out and just getting on the microphone, being overly loud and constantly yelling and screaming. So I figured that would be a pretty good wrestling reference for Swellow. Then my Licky Licky, I named it Katrina. It's another wrestling reference for a girl that would give her opponents the lick of death after they were defeated. So I went with that for Licky Licky. And then now for Musharna, I went with the Velveteen Dream, another wrestling reference that you guys probably wouldn't know or understand, but it's pretty fitting. So I have to shout out the Vert for that one. That was a really good idea. Now, for my next pick, I went with Lapras, my favorite. Throwback to Season 5, where I was kind of like, I was busting Cheese Boy's chops. I made a video because up to that point in NPL Season 4, he had beaten me twice that season and knocked me out of the playoffs. So I made this hype package type video where I imitated his voice and just was in his team builder, and I was pretending I was building for me, if I was him, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go with Lapras, my favorite. And it just became kind of a meme from there because Lapras is his channel's mascot. So Lapras is another Pokemon I've been looking into a fair amount, and it seems like it just has a lot of versatility with just excellent stats and a really nice move pool. So Lapras is a Pokemon that can do quite a bit, and kind of like the other Pokemon that I've drafted, has that natural bulk, has that natural great move pool that allows it to be versatile and do a lot of different things, which is kind of what I'm trying to focus on this season because I just don't want to be predictable. Last season, my team obviously wasn't very good, but I was almost locked into running those hyper-offensive types of teams, and I love that style, but the problem was I just was kind of forced to running the same type of team over and over again, and the fact that my team wasn't that great, plus the fact that the better players were kind of getting used to what I was doing, it became difficult for me to consistently win games. So I'm really trying to, get away from that this season because I'm someone who really likes to be creative and mix things up. That's one of my strengths, I think. So I think this team will help me suit those strengths by having a lot more versatility. So Lapras, I think, is a Pokemon that can be pretty versatile, and it was only 2 points. I think that's definitely good value for Lapras because of some of the things that it could do. That's all I'm going to say. So then, next up, I'm going to tell you my last pick before my Mega. I picked my Mega 11th, but I'll tell you my other Pokemon first, and then I'll go back to my Mega. So I was going through different Pokemon, and I only had 1 point left. So I was going through a lot of different things, and they had some pretty good 1 point steals. There was actually Walrein at one point, which I was actually also considering, but I figured Lapras is a little better and worth going the extra point for it. So I was looking at some other 1-pointers, and I was kind of settled towards Carbink, but then another Mon caught my eye, and it's actually an Unmon. It's just an Unmon. No one should ever use it. It is Unmonferno. That's right, shrug. Unmonferno, I think, will actually be a solid addition to the squad because one thing that I kind of overlooked was the amount of Stealth Rockers that I have, and you don't need a ton, but it's just like, at this point, all I had was Nidoking, and I was like, all right, something that could potentially take that pressure off of Nidoking would be nice. So a little bit more priority would be nice. I don't have a fire type, and Monferno is a fire type that's actually not weak to rocks, which is kind of useful. And even though it's not a bulky Pokemon, it's actually very frail. With an Eviolite and a solid defensive typing, it can actually form defensive roles better than you would expect. So it's a Pokemon that I decided to go with because it's also the middle stage evolution of my favorite Pokemon, Infernape, so it has a little bit of a special place in my heart that way. But when I thought of the nickname Unmonferno, I had to pick it. I had to go with Monferno. I think that it is a solid pick that rounds out my team pretty well, actually. But finally, I'll tell you my last pick, because going into my second to last pick, where I picked my Mega, I had 13 points left. Now, there were no Megas that are 13 points, so the next best was 12. And there was a Pokemon that I've been dying to try out, and I think is pretty underrated, and I was really excited to use, and I thought of it as soon as Mega Arrow got sniped, and I said, you know what, this is what I think I want to rebuild my draft around, and I went with none other than Brock Lesnar, the Mega Tyranitar. That's right, for our Mega pick and our final Pokemon, we have Mega Tyranitar. Now, Mega T-Tar, I do think, is underrated because it is so fat. It is unreal how bulky it is. It's one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game. It has base 100 HP, which is very solid. Base 150 defense, which is absurd. And base 120 special defense, which is very good. But it gets boosted by the Sandstorm. So Mega Tyranitar's special defense in the sand it's almost like you're looking at Blissey. Blissey that has over 400 attack, Mega Tyranitar's base 164 attack stat, which is just enormous, with amazing coverage, solid special attack, and base 95, and its speed is not that bad. Base 71 is like a decent little speed tier that can creep some, I guess, kind of clutch defensive Pokemon, or even some slow offensive Pokemon that you might want to creep if you have to. And with also that 71 base speed tier and access to Dragon Dance, it allows it to outspeed a lot. It outspeeds a lot more things that regular Tyranitar couldn't outspeed with a Choice Scarf or a Dragon Dance up. So Mega Tyranitar, I think, is a fantastic Pokemon. And like I said, I was kind of low on Stealth Rockers, so the fact that it's a very solid Stealth Rocker because of its amazing bulk and offensive presence, I decided to go with T-Tar because my dog's like sniffing my computer and everything. Tyranitar is it's one of my favorite Pokemon, all in all. And I actually think its Mega Evolution looks great. Some people think it looks kind of weird or over the top, but I actually think it looks great. I'm a big fan of its design, and I just like Mega Evolutions in general. I think they're pretty cool. So the fact that one of my favorite Pokemon ever has this badass Mega Evolution, which is always cool to me. It was always one of my favorite Pokemon to use in OU, even though it was never... I mean, it had times where it's good, but it's just generally not one of the best Megas because it's easy to kind of exploit its weaknesses and whatnot. But overall, Tyranitar, Mega Tyranitar, is a very underrated and slept-on Pokemon in my opinion, and I think it's more than worth the 12 points that I spent on it. And I didn't have a Dark type on my team, so I was like, you know what? Because one of the other snipes, I didn't get sniped too often in this draft, which was nice, but one of the big ones was Mega Aerodactyl and also Alolan Muck. I wanted to pick that kind of early because Alolan Muck's one of the best counters to something like Tapu Lele, which is available, but I just think that Alolan Muck has gotten a big buff this generation, so yeah, I was kind of keen to give it a shot, but yeah, there weren't that many good Dark types. There just generally aren't that many great Dark types in the format. You have Tyranitar, you have Weavile, Crocodile, Alolan Muck, which I think is very solid. But then kind of going from there, you have things that are just kind of meh, in my opinion. You have, Mega Gyarados, I don't think is that great as a Dark type. Like if you draft Mega Gyarados, I think you should have another Dark type for the most part. What else? Are there any other Megas? Sharpedo. Mega Sharpedo is a solid Dark type because of how strong its Dark Stab is. Regular Sharpedo I don't like that much as a Dark type. I think it's a pretty good Pokemon, but I don't think it's overall a great Dark type because Dark can be such a good defensive typing and also offensive typing, and its Stab Crunch isn't that spammable, unfortunately. Zoroark I don't think is that great of a Dark type or a Dark type to have on a team. I think it's like a pretty good Pokemon, but I don't think it's that good. And then, there's just things like Bisharp or Scrafty and some lower budget Dark types that are good. I think they're pretty good Pokemon, but just not those really good Dark types that could really help deal with some solid Ghosts or Psychic types that can get out of hand if you let them set up. So that's why I wanted a Dark type, and I also didn't really need the Rock type, but I wanted something that could set up Stealth Rock. So Mega Tyranitar really fit the bill, and it kind of just fits the bill of the rest of the team. It's a Pokemon with amazing bulk and amazing offensive presence, so it could really be switched up and be versatile, which, like I said, I think that's one of my strengths as a builder. So I'm excited to use Mega Tyranitar, and its name is Brock Lesnar, like I mentioned. So that is the Los Angeles Reshirams 2018 NPL Season 8 draft. Now, let me run through it one more time. We have Celesteela, Latios, Azumarill, Nidoking, Delmise, Raikou, Swellow, Licky, Musharna, Lapras, Mega Tyranitar, Unmonferno. And I am really satisfied with my draft. I don't know if I would say it's the best draft in the league, or I don't know if I would say it's the best draft I've ever had, but for a draft that had a points limit, and for a draft that had so many good drafters and 16 people in the league, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I'm very happy with how it came out. I'm excited to use this team. I think that I could do quite well with this team, and I'm just looking forward to see how it goes because I have a lot of things that I haven't used before, and some of the things that I have used before are some of my favorites to use. So I'm looking forward to the season. I am. I have a pretty stacked schedule. You'll get to see games between me and the likes of Cheese Boy, my rival, Gypsy King, my other rival. Who else? I get to play new people I haven't played, like Verd is one that I'm really excited for. And yeah, it should be exciting. It should be a fun season. Hopefully I could really pick it up from last season, but I hope that you guys are excited and that you'll stick around to watch and support and everything like that, because hey, that's the reason we almost made a comeback last season. It was because of all of your support. I was calling you guys worthless viewers, thinking that I could just do all this on my own, but I needed the support of my friends and community to help bring me back up to the point where we almost and should have made a playoff run. So with that being said, I'm going to end it here because we've gone 45 minutes and I don't want to go into other people's teams because I'll end up rambling there too. And yeah, I will end up pretty much going over a lot of those matchups anyway when it comes to talking about those games when I play those people. So yeah, that's it. That is it for my NPL Season 8 draft analysis. I wanted to make sure I gave a pretty thorough one just because, like I said, there's a good chance this is my last season in the National Pokeball League. So I hope I didn't leave too much out, and I hope you guys enjoyed it because I put, I guess, a good amount of energy and passion into it. So I hope, despite it being a long video, it was still enjoyable. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below, and check out all the other NPL coaches, the channel, whatever. And most importantly, have yourselves a fantastic day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Later.